Matthew Stafford, the comeback king. Does he have another? Back shoulder. Cooper Kupp's got it! The Los Angeles Rams are world champions!
Run it back! We can bring the super team back. Why not run it back?
For Matt Stafford, you're talking about a guy that's still in the prime of his career.
You're talking about an offense with Cooper Kupp, Cam Akers, now Allen Robinson. It is another Super Bowl run.
Bobby Wagner is signing a 5-year deal with the Los Angeles Rams.
Do not discount the Rams at all. They'll be right there at the end.
Run it up, run it back.
The rich, well, they stay rich this week as the Rams have landed 6-time All-Pro linebacker Bobby Wagner to help solidify their defense. We say hello and welcome in to NFL Live. We've got actually close to a full house here in studio. Jeremy Fowler to my left, Rob Nikovich to my right, I am Field Yates, and we have Sam Acho joining us from his home as well. Should be a fun-spirited hour ahead. And we begin with the Rams, who signed, as I mentioned, All-Pro linebacker Bobby Wagner yesterday, which means he teams up now with Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. The Rams are now the second team in NFL history to have a 3-time first-team All-Pro at defensive line, linebacker, and defensive back. And this is sort of a full-circle moment as Rams GM Les Snead had his eye on Bobby Wagner a long time ago, as he actually was asked about his biggest draft day regrets. Here's one that he brought up.
The answer is definitely yes, but it'll probably I'll go back to the one that makes the Hall of Fame, rookie year general manager, and one of the players we were definitely thinking of targeting there was Bobby Wagner. And that year, Bobby didn't go to the combine. So, you maybe thought he would slip a little bit farther in the draft. But unfortunately, he didn't, and he didn't make it. And that's probably going to go down as the one that, let's call it, got picked right in front of you. That probably is hurt the most, but considering he did go to a division rival into a Hall of Fame career with the Seahawks.
Well, here's the good news, Les. You got your guy now. And Jeremy, tell me more about how this deal actually came together between the two sides.
Yeah, Field, well, I was told that Wagner was weighing his options in the last 4 to 5 days because the Baltimore Ravens made a compelling push. They made a good financial offer. They sold him on his place in the defense, the tradition of linebackers there. Yeah. I was told Wagner was dealing with one other West Coast team as well. But it really came down to L.A. as the primary option. Many people around the league believed from the beginning that the Rams were the favorite and that Wagner's a West Coast guy, an L.A. guy, that he wanted to be there and liked the fit. They just had to work out the financials.
Played his high school ball nearby, played his college ball at Utah State, now plays his professional football in L.A. We've got two linebackers on the show, including, of course, Sam Acho. And Acho, let me ask you this. What makes Bobby Wagner so good at this job to this day?
Well, not only is he an every down linebacker, he had 170 tackles, so we know he can play the run, but it's his pass coverage that I'm most excited about seeing translate to the Rams. And so here's a play right here. It's 2nd and 14, 113 left. You're up by a touchdown. The ball's at the 15-yard line. You know that number 3 receiver, Cole Kmet, who's a tight end, is going to run to the goalpost. You've watched film. So what does Bobby Wagner do? He lines up 8 yards off the ball and 2 yards inside, making sure that Cole Kmet doesn't cross his face. But more than that, once this flips, he stays patient. He stays patient, no PI, plays the ball. Critical situation at a critical time. It's the smarts of Bobby Wagner that's going to translate most to the LA Rams.
Yeah, I agree, and I think playing behind Aaron Donald is actually going to help as well, because as a linebacker, when you have a guy in front of you that is that disruptive, really they play a one-gap defense, and what that is the guy on the line of scrimmage, if he gets one gap, you as a linebacker, you just replace. So with Aaron Donald and his ability to take on two, to get vertical, to make running backs stop, cut, redirect quickly, Bobby Wagner is going to take advantage of that. So I'm excited to see how he does with the Rams this year. He's getting a little bit older. You know, he's not a young kid anymore, but guess what? He's got a lot of experience, and he's going to bring a ton of leadership to that team.
Actually, let me ask you this. Everything looks good. At least a lot of things look good on April 1st for teams on paper. Is there a vulnerability for this Rams defense right now, or are they about as loaded as you can find, and this next Super Bowl is basically just a formality?
Well, if Von Miller would have stayed, there would have been no vulnerabilities. But Von Miller went over to Buffalo. He's over in West Seneca and Orchard Park. And so now there is a major vulnerability, a.k.a. liability, at outside linebacker. Yes, Leonard Floyd can get after the quarterback. 9.5 sacks last year, 10.5 before that. Yes, you have Bobby Wagner on the inside, playing inside linebacker. And I get Aaron Donald is there as well. But usually you need one more rusher on the edge to really affect quarterbacks. So that's, for me, the biggest liability. I think you need another corner to back up Jalen Ramsey, but the main thing you need is people getting after the quarterback. Von Miller leaving is a major blow.
Yeah, and last year you saw the Rams, they saw that they needed more pressure. So what did they do? They went out and got Von Miller. So this year, having the draft in place, they can go out and maybe get a pass rusher. And if they feel that they're not generating enough pressure, they might make another trade. Look like what they did last year, get a piece, and then go to the Super Bowl.
Here's the good news. It's only April 1st. Les Snead has plenty of time to trade for like 3 more All-Pros by the time the actual season begins.
He will do that.
He will. And maybe it's not necessarily trades, but perhaps free agents. That brings us right to quick reads, Jeremy, where I do want to know about a couple of the best free agents available on the defense side of the ball. Perhaps they could help Los Angeles. What do you know about a few guys, starting with Tyrann Mathieu?
Yeah, let's start with the Honey Badger. Mathieu is being patient here. I'm told the Pittsburgh Steelers did look into his market, but they're not going to be overly aggressive here in their spending. The issue talking to teams is that he's played 9 years in the league. They worry about the tread, the mileage. Has he lost a bit of the speed? So he's maybe not a big money player at this point. That's why he could continue to wait, see what injuries happen around the league or what happens in the draft, and then seize his opportunity. And you got Stephon Gilmore. Several teams, I'm told, have been in the mix on him. They believe he can still play in a big way. You're hearing a little bit of the Chiefs. I know they've talked about him a lot internally. Philadelphia Eagles, a little bit of the Raiders. So there will be suitors. It just depends on how much they're willing to spend because he's over 30 years old. But this is a former Defensive Player of the Year. He will have a job. Just depends on when. Heard a little bit of the Bills, too, today. A little bit. There could be a reunion there potentially. Let's go to Jadeveon Clowney. This one's a little bit of a different market because Cleveland has zeroed in on bringing him back. They've made offers. They've been in contact, but they know Clowney typically takes his time that we've seen in the past 2 free agencies. He waited till about mid-April to sign with Cleveland last year, so they're hopeful that he's back. But I'm told he has had multiple offers from teams, and he is in the process of weighing those right now.
All right, let's go from a guy who's already in the pros as a pass rusher to one who wants to become one soon. That is, of course, Kayvon Thibodeau. And as far as talent goes, you can question what the Oregon star brings to the table. He has the chance to show off his skill set at Oregon's Pro Day today, where the NFL is very well represented from coaches and scouts from literally every single NFL team. And let's bring in Matt Miller to talk about Kayvon Thibodeau because there was a time where some thought he could be the #1 overall pick in this year's draft. It feels like he's fallen a bit down boards. Why might that be the case?
Yeah, Field, he has fallen down boards. He sits right now as my #9 overall player. I know in Mel's latest mock draft, he slipped down too. I think some of it is the expectation didn't match the reality. When we watched him as a freshman, we thought, oh my goodness, this is the next Chase Young. This is the next Bosa brother. He didn't live up to that expectation. He's quite a bit smaller than I think a lot of people expected as well, at only 254 pounds for the position. And you did see flashes. You saw great plays where you watch the highlights, you walk away saying, this is a #1 overall pick. I think the biggest issue is consistency, where teams were able to control him, able to shut him down a little bit. And, of course, I mean, the lasting image is him in a walking boot after week 1. So there's an injury that he's dealing with as well. I think today is going to be huge, not just for the workout, but obviously the interview portion as well.
Yeah, I would say this, and I get the image of the walking boot in week 1, but before he was in that walking boot, he was making major plays using his explosiveness, his speed, and his get-off. What stands out to me the most about Kayvon Thibodeau and why I'm most excited about him is the way that he gets off the ball. He's a football player. His technique needs to get better. His hand placement, all that needs to get better. But Kayvon Thibodeau has the type of intangibles that you just can't teach. His speed around the edge, his ability to bend, his ability to counter. That's what I love the most. A lot of pass rushers, they're premeditated. He is not. He counters, he chases, and he has the physical tools to be great. To your point, Matt, he needs to turn the engine on all the time. That's probably the knock on him. Yep. But if you can get that going, then he's definitely the player that you want to have on your team because of the upside that he has.
Okay, so he might fall, but hopefully not too much. And Ninko, if you look at teams maybe in the 5 to 15 range, is there one that maybe makes the most sense in your opinion for Kayvon Thibodeau?
Yeah, I think the Giants, and you look at their pass rush win rate, in 2020 they were last, and last year they were 30th. So they're a team that needs some pass rush. They have 2 picks in the top 10. So what are they going to do? I hope they go get a pass rusher, and they also need to protect the quarterback. So they need to go get an offensive lineman, and they need a pass rusher. So I think that's a great opportunity for them to go and get a pass rusher, go and get an offensive lineman, protect your young quarterback. And you look at Thibodeau, the guy is athletic. And as a pass rusher, I can speak about effort and having a motor. And when you look at some guys that are super gifted, super athletic, sometimes that isn't always on. And I can think back to Chandler Jones. Every time I would walk past him in a hallway, in the locker room, he was doing pass rush moves on me. He was trying to double swipe me. And pass rush is kind of like a sickness. Like you just want to get to the quarterback, and you have to have a hunger. It's like an art. So you have to have that passion and that drive. So I think that that's been also some of the critiques on the passion and the drive. Does he love the game? But, time will tell on where he goes.
Hey, Matt, this time of the year, it's always difficult to suss out what's real and what's not. But it seems like if there is a player who could leapfrog Kayvon Thibodeau as the second defensive, front seven player, edge rusher, however you want to classify him, that could come off the board, it could be Trayvon Walker from Georgia. Why might he be the player that's moving up the boards when Thibodeau seems to be moving down the boards right now?
It's really a combo of what Nico and Acho were just saying. You want someone who has the traits, right? And we saw that from Trayvon Walker. 271 pounds, and he's putting up crazy numbers at the combine in terms of the 40-yard dash, the explosiveness, the strength. But then you turn on the film and watch what he did in the college football playoffs against Michigan and Alabama, and he was Georgia's best defensive player on some of those snaps. And that's saying a lot because every player on that Georgia defense will start in the NFL. Most likely they were that good. So I think with Walker, you get excited about, okay, I see the flashes that Acho was talking about, the athleticism and a player who's just natural. But then like Nico was saying, it's the sickness, the technique. And I think with Walker, there's a belief that he's only getting better. He was not a pass rusher for 3 years. A lot of times at Georgia, he was asked to set the edge. He was asked to play inside. So I think with him, we're seeing a player that has a much higher ceiling.
Really interesting to see how this all shakes out. Again, the draft is now less than 4 weeks. If me pick one, I'll go with chocolate chip cookie dough, by the way, because that is the correct answer as it pertains to favorite ice cream flavor. Time now for us to move to some quick reads. And again, Jeremy, let's dive right back into your notebook on some notable draft prospects.
Yeah, let's start with Sauce Gardner, cornerback out of Cincinnati, putting the hot sauce on the draft process. Most people around the league I speak to believe that he is the top cornerback in this draft, but it is close because of LSU's Derek Stingley. They agree might be the most athletic cornerback in this class, but they're concerned that he hasn't put together a full body work since 2019, where Gardner has that composite work ready to go. Probably the most complete corner. Maybe not as good considered as like J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain last year, but very close. Could go in the top 10. Let's go to Desmond Ridder. This guy is rising in the quarterback process. I've talked to several executives who say this guy's making a serious case. Maybe he goes late day one, maybe he goes day two, but if he's there at day two, there will be several teams that are interested. I'm told he's been in the interview process selling his ability to beat out a veteran in a competition day one to be a starter. So that confidence has definitely resonated with teams in that process. And then, of course, we have Malik Willis, highest upside in the draft at the quarterback position. I spoke to a source close to Willis who said they believe he will go somewhere in the top 20 because I asked in relation to the Steelers, right? If he's there at 20, would Pittsburgh take that chance? And I was told, probably not going to be there at that time. The problem is I haven't talked to one person around the league who believes that Willis will start day one. That year one, he needs to sit. And so that could give some teams some reservations if they're picking high in the draft.
Okay, so Matt, he is the number one quarterback on your board, is Malik Willis. Does Jeremy's reporting about the floor being pick number 20 sort of mesh with what you've been hearing about a potential landing spot?
Yeah, absolutely. Jeremy's spot on there. I think, we even did a Draft Buzz notebook a week ago, and there's talk he could go to the Detroit Lions. Now, that might be a little bit of a smokescreen, might be a little buzz as Detroit maybe tries to move back in this draft, but I think you have to look at Carolina at number 6 overall. There's definitely a team like the Atlanta Falcons at number 8 overall. They could be looking for a quarterback in the future. You have the Saints in there as well. So there are multiple teams ahead of the Pittsburgh Steelers where I could see them saying, hey, we like the guy, but we're not going to get him. He's not going to be there. I think one thing we are seeing is that quarterback need trumping where we actually have these guys ranked. No one would rank 2 quarterbacks in the top 20 this year. Yeah. But I do think we're seeing the need after the free agent market has settled down, after the trade market has settled down. I mean, if you're Carolina, it feels pretty desperate that you have to get a quarterback this year.
And as we know, quarterbacks always rise during the pre-draft process. Hey, Sam, there's a lot to like about Malik Willis' game, but you do have some concerns. What might they be?
I do. So obviously I was doing college football analysis during this season for ESPN, and I was looking forward to Malik Willis against Ole Miss, and he did disappoint. He did not shine in that game. He got sacked 9 times, 7 in the first half, threw 3 interceptions. And so my concern is not necessarily the big moments, right? I like how he recovered from it, but my concern is at that game where everyone had it circled, you didn't perform. And I get it. It's Liberty, it's Ole Miss. You could say it's 2 different tiers of programs, but when you watch the tape, even when I was watching that game, I was discouraged and disappointed. Matt Corral, he was hobbled as well, so I wasn't overly impressed by him during that game, but I wanted to see more.
Interesting. Yeah, it's been certainly one of those processes where it feels like if it's Monday, someone might be QB1, and by Wednesday, that player might be QB3. But let's go back to a player that Jeremy mentioned as well, and Desmond Ridder. Matt, it sounds like maybe he is a guy who has a chance to be the quarterback one in this year's class. Do you believe that's viable? And if so, what might be the traits that separate him from players like Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett?
Yeah, we've all been surprised before by who the first quarterback drafted is. And if it's Desmond Ridder, I don't think it would be a shock because of what we saw at the scouting combine with the 4.49 run and the 40-yard dash. That shows up on tape. He's also incredibly experienced, which a lot of the quarterbacks in this draft are lacking, and he's experienced against bigger programs. Like we said with Malik Willis, you're playing at Liberty, you're not often seeing Division I or NFL-type talent. So I think that is a calling card for Ridder. His connections with Alec Pierce were great, especially in the red zone. The biggest question, accuracy, which I thought he did improve this year, but there is still a lot of room for improvement.
Okay, it will be extremely compelling to see how this quarterback room ends up stacking by the time we get to Las Vegas. Hey, speaking of quarterbacks, when we were
Mayfield, the Browns quarterback, requested a trade.
The other big question here is Baker. His trade value is dropping and dropping and dropping.
This is a bad situation.
Whatever team decides to sign Baker Mayfield, they are betting on an unknown.
They understood what they had in Baker Mayfield, and good wasn't good enough for them.
He has taken his last snap with this football team.
I think everybody understands the situation, and we're hoping that there's closure to it at some point.
So we're less than a month away from the NFL draft, and the Browns still have Baker Mayfield on their roster. So, Jeremy, what are you hearing about Cleveland's options when it comes to the former #1 overall pick, who right now clearly does not fit in their plans anymore?
Yeah, well, Field, I talked to a source involved who said Baker right now believes that Cleveland is slow playing this a little bit and that other teams are slow playing this too because they don't want to pay the $18.8 million salary. And so they're essentially going to wait to see if Cleveland will just agree to pay part of that, all of it, or even release him outright. So that's one option. The other is to just sit on him and wait, see what develops. I talked to a general manager this week who said that they should do that because after the draft, a team might have quarterback needs maybe they didn't fulfill, or there might be an injury at the position. But I've talked to a few execs that are shocked that there just isn't a lot of buzz around Mayfield and teams interested right now. They said he's put together 2 good seasons.
Yeah, I'm surprised as well. And some of that surprise is because people forget last year Baker Mayfield was essentially playing with one arm. He had his arm in a sling for a lot of the season. And though he didn't look good, he was playing injured. That used to be lauded. But now for Baker, whether it's because of his personality that people don't like or whether it's because of the poor performance through injury, there's not a huge market for him. I think a lot of that market has to do with the money that he's owed. But I still believe he is a starter in the NFL. There's 4 to 5 teams right now that are looking for a starter. And there's a lot of talk saying this year's draft doesn't have many current NFL starting caliber quarterbacks. So for me, I think Baker Mayfield deserves another shot.
And I'm not surprised at all because of the price tag. And you have to think about this, too. Cleveland drafted him in the first round. He was what they wanted at the quarterback position, and he had the keys, and it didn't work out. So they went outside and found somebody, and they paid him the most that any quarterback has ever been paid. So obviously, they knew more in the building than what we all know outside the building. And the consistency issues, the injury history, the 3rd and 10-plus issues that he was having, the Cleveland Browns knew they had to go out and get a piece. So what I think he should do, because of the fact that he was so in the hyper-focus, everyone's so focused on his performances, maybe take a year off, go be a backup somewhere, and kind of just recharge your batteries, fix your shoulder, and know that you can sit behind a starter and the next time you get an opportunity to take advantage of it. Because if he goes somewhere else, if he is traded and goes somewhere else and it doesn't work out, well, it's going to be even that much harder for him to have another shot.
And part of this seems like supply and demand, too, right? A lot of teams have sort of already cast their die with the quarterback or will wait till the draft. But, Jeremy, you mentioned that there have been some teams that have at least been exploring Baker Mayfield. Do you have any sense of teams that have been doing their homework on a potential Mayfield trade?
Well, I know Seattle is one team that has done the homework. They've watched film on him internally with their coaches. They've talked about it at the front office level, but it's complicated there because they have Drew Lock, they like Drew Lock, and they're working to re-sign Geno Smith to a deal. And, he's played on minimum salary deals, but he actually played decently well last year, so he could get a little more money. So that complicates the process. Carolina has looked into it, but I'm not getting a strong sense that they have a lot of interest. I think if he is released outright, then you would have 4 or 5 teams majorly in contention. But on the trade market, it's just been pretty slow.
So I know people don't have a way of accepting this for some reason, but Seattle traded for Drew Lock because they wanted him in the trade. It wasn't like he was the difference between that deal getting done or not. They wanted him in that trade. So it seems like they do have some level of interest in him being their starter. But Sam, what do you think about the possibility of Seattle also adding Baker Mayfield, a guy who at least has some admirers, you would think, in almost every front office? I mean, it's not like he was, the 3rd or 4th round pick. He was the #1 player in this draft just a few years ago.
I think it's a huge possibility, and I based that off of when Tom Brady retired. There was talks of Tampa Bay looking at Baker Mayfield, and so there's a huge possibility. I think Seattle wanted Drew Lock because if they didn't have Drew Lock, they wouldn't have had a quarterback. And so yes, they see his potential, but you need to bring in someone else, whether it's through the draft, which they're exploring, or through Baker Mayfield, who can come in and compete. I understand Carolina maybe not wanting to go that route, but Seattle, you have this tough, gritty quarterback who you know what he can provide when healthy, and I think they should definitely look into it.
Okay, we'll be very fascinated to see where Baker Mayfield ends up, but the draft is also just around the corner, which means time for the round of Ask Matt, where Matt Miller answers your draft questions. And once again, I'm passing the interview baton off. This time I go to Ninko.
All right, Matt, so I have a question about a Boilermaker, and I am a former Boilermaker. So
I hadn't heard that before.
We've all heard of George Karlaftis, the defensive end. What is your take on him, and what is the talks about him and his pro day and how he looked at the combine?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest questions is which player are you getting? We saw early in the season where he dominated. He was unstoppable. 8 pressures in week 1. Then you get later in the season, Big Ten play. He gets shut down by Ohio State. So I think there are questions right now of what type of player is he? I think the combine, it was a tale of two stories. Athletically, he looked fine, but under 33-inch arm length. That's definitely something that has scouts kind of scratching their chin a little bit. I think he will be very dependent on scheme. If he goes to a scheme where he can use his power, where he can use his hands, it's going to be a great fit. If he's drafted somewhere where he's expected to be a speed rusher, not a great fit. But I think late first round is probably the sweet spot for him, Nico, where maybe even a team like the Kansas City Chiefs at 29 or 30 overall could draft a player like him, and he would be a tremendous fit day one opposite Frank Clark.
If he looks anything like Ninko in the NFL, a team will be very lucky to have him. Let's get to some news on NFL Live, as we are taking you new on NFL Live. Free agent quarterback Colin Kaepernick will hold an exhibition throwing event with some draft-eligible players during halftime of Michigan's spring game tomorrow. NFL club personnel that are in attendance are permitted to watch this event. Of course, Kaepernick played for Jim Harbaugh during his time in San Francisco. Hey, coming up on NFL My Turn as we play Ask Matt. Matt, is Iowa State running back Breece Hall the best back in this class? And if so, does he belong in the first round?
Oh, absolutely, Field, on both questions. He is the best back in this class. I think we saw that the last 2 years at Iowa State, back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons, back-to-back 20-touchdown seasons. You could argue he was the best running back in college football this past year. He is tremendous, and I think what he does as a runner and as a receiver out of the backfield are definitely eye-opening. If you're the Buffalo Bills at 25 and there are no receivers on the board of value, I think Breece Hall is the type of weapon that could take that offense to the next level. The same for Tampa Bay. Even after bringing back Leonard Fournette at 27 overall, they're definitely both in play for him late round 1. I know our guy Mel Kiper wouldn't love the running back in the first round, but sometimes you have to do it.
Sometimes you got to pull the trigger. Matt, great stuff as always. More from Matt coming not just today, but all up to the draft process. And it's time to talk about wide receivers because this draft is loaded with them. A pair of them come from Ohio State. In Mel Kiper Jr.'s latest mock draft, he has the Falcons selecting Garrett Wilson with the 8th overall pick and the Eagles taking Chris Olave with the 16th pick. There have been just 3 instances of multiple wide receivers from the same college being selected within the first 20 picks of the draft, but Alabama's done it twice in the past 2 years because that is Alabama in a nutshell. And we're right back to Matt Miller. And you had a chance to talk to some scouts about the Ohio State duo. What are they saying about those 2 awesome wideouts?
Yeah, they're going to go high, and Mel has them at 8 and 16. That might not even be high enough. I think there's a good chance that Garrett Wilson's the first receiver off the board ahead of Drake London from USC, ahead of Jameson Williams from Alabama, and Chris Olave, who was just super solid the last years at Ohio State, so much so that people almost forgot about him until the NFL scouting combine when he put up ridiculous numbers, and he kind of reignited that conversation. So I do think there's a possibility that they're both drafted in the top 12 to 13 picks, and as you saw in Mel's mock draft with Olave going 16, I think that's the floor for him, Field. I think there's a great chance that these could even be the top 2 receivers off the board, depending on how teams feel about Drake London, again from USC, coming off that fractured ankle that he suffered in late October. But these two both have speed. They both can track the ball down the field, and they're very polished route runners coming out of Ohio State.
And they both run a similar type of offensive scheme that a lot of NFL teams run. We see these deep passes, these deep overs. You see Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson oftentimes running wide open downfield. Well, you see that with the LA Chargers as well. Justin Herbert has a huge arm, throwing the ball deep on routes that these receivers already know how to run. So yes, to Matt's point, they're crisp route runners, they're elite playmakers, great ball skills, but there will be less of a learning curve when it comes to entering into this NFL system and NFL schemes. We see with wide receivers receivers. It's about route running. It's about hands. There's not necessarily a big-time strength gap like you see in O-line or D-line. That's why I like both of these receivers to go higher than expected.
Matt, let's do like a little mini big board here of just wide receivers. 1, 2, 3. How do you have these two Ohio State players along with Drake London from USC?
Yeah, I have Drake London first. But again, it goes back to type. I love those 6'5" receivers that can win in the red zone. And then Jamison Williams from Alabama, despite the torn ACL in the national championship game, and then Garrett Wilson as the third receiver. I would have Chris Olave as fourth if we want to keep going down the big board list of receivers. But it is an incredibly talented group that someone like Garrett Wilson can be the third receiver ranked.
By the way, next week, Drake London has the chance to perform at USC's Pro Day. He shattered his ankle, broke his ankle, I should say, on Halloween. Still won Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year, but a big day for him to show scouts where he is at physically. Let's go from college wide receivers to pro wide receivers. And back for some more quick reads from Jeremy Fowler. The class still has some players to offer that are pretty darn good. What do we know?
Let's start with Jarvis Landry. You see him here. I'm told there's a very real chance that the Cleveland Browns bring him back. They have interest in re-signing him. They tried to restructure his contract a month ago. Didn't work out. They eventually released him. So there are teams that need good veteran help. Green Bay Packers come to mind.
Okay.
New Orleans Saints are looking around.
Yeah.
But the Browns, they do have interest here, so they could try to work this out. Now let's go to Odell Beckham. Probably less of a chance he ends up in Cleveland, although you never know. Watch for the Patriots here. I'm told they at least had some exploratory talks early in free agency. Remember, the Patriots also looked into Beckham in November when he was released by Cleveland. And so Beckham has interest in Bill Belichick potentially playing for him. You know, there could be some mutual stuff there, so something to keep in mind. But there's no real rush here from what I'm told on both sides, either with the team or with Beckham, because he's not going to play most likely until October earliest, maybe, probably November because of the ACL.
If a team is evaluating those compensatory picks, by the way, some patience could really pay off for them. Nick, if you're a team that's in win-now mode, who has a need at wide receiver, like the Patriots that Jeremy just mentioned, or the Packers, who we know have a Devontae Adams-sized hole there now, would you go for a veteran or take your chances in the draft?
I'd go with a veteran, and I know it's right now the game is changing and kids are playing 7-on-7 when they're 10 years old, but when you look at the history and the statistics, a rookie receiver to come in and take you to a Super Bowl is really, really hard. You have to understand they're going through their college season, then they go through the combine, get drafted, rookie minicamp, training camp, then a season that is double the length. So
other than that,
to have a rookie come in, and Chase last year obviously is an outlier. You saw him just do tremendous things. He came close. But if you're a team that needs one guy to come in and to help you get to a Super Bowl to win games, I would think that a veteran that has had the experience, like Landry, I've played against him, he's a heck of a player. I would say that he would be a guy that could come in and put a little fire in that receiver group.
And I actually don't think that Jamar Chase is an outlier. I think he's going to become more of the norm. Look at guys like Justin Jefferson, who come in early and make a huge impact. These guys are setting records. These guys are breaking records, not only for their team, but for rookies all around. And so I would, if I'm a team that needs a receiver, if I'm a team that just let Devontae Adams go, i.e. Green Bay Packers, a team that just let Tyreek Hill go, i.e. Kansas City Chiefs, I don't necessarily want a veteran receiver. I know Kansas City got Juju, so they're already addressing that. They got Marquez Valdes-Scantling, so it's been addressed. I'd rather have a rookie receiver on a rookie contract who I know will come in and produce and then use those funds elsewhere.
Yeah, I know I'm supposed to be the draft guy that comes in and raves about draft prospects, but I'm actually on the side of the free agent route or the veteran route just because if it's 1 year. Like if I'm Green Bay Packers, we got Aaron Rodgers who's 38, 39 years old. We're not thinking 4 to 5 years down the road. We're thinking right now. So I think that's where someone like Jarvis Landry or Odell is much more valuable. Now, if I could have Jamar Chase, this changes the conversation, obviously. But these teams are not drafting in the top 5 or top 10 where you can get one of those players we just talked about from Ohio State or a Drake London from USC. So I think this year in particular, if you're a team in the 20s like Kansas City, like Green Bay, the veteran route is smarter. And I do think that's why we saw Kansas City add Juju Smith-Schuster, add MVS, because they know, hey, at 29-30, we might not have a shot at one of the top 5 or 6 receivers in this draft, especially because Jamison Williams is not expected to play, at least early in his rookie year. So you have to add that note when you're looking at, okay, top 6 receivers. They could all be off the board, and one of them at least is going to have to redshirt for probably half the season.
It all sounds good when you're doing your mock drafts, but then the draft actually rolls around, and next thing you know, all the wide receivers you like are gone by pick 20, much less pick 29. Nico, I want to ask you about those 2 former Browns wide receivers, or at least former for now. Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr., very different styles of players, right? Landry has dominated from the slot in his career. If you're Green Bay specifically, because they do have a massive wide receiver need, which one's more appealing?
Landry, it'd have to be Landry. And OBJ, I love the way he plays. I was a huge fan of the Patriots going out and getting OBJ, but having that ACL tear in the Super Bowl is really, really hard. I've torn mine, and I know that when you're trying to rehab that and it's 6, 7, 8 months out, you're not the same player. And this next year coming up, if you sign OBJ, he might not be as explosive or the same guy to stick his foot in the ground and make a radical cut because of that injury. So if you do sign him, you have to expect that the first year, it might not be the same guy. And the second year is that big jump to where you'll get more out of him like we've seen in the past when he was healthy.
And if I'm Odell, I know that Green Bay could make sense, and I get that, but I think a better spot for me for Odell would be back to LA with the Rams. You already have a receiver in Allen Robinson and Cooper Kupp who can carry the load. So now when he gets healthy, it's similar to when he signed last year. He starts to get back into the groove of things and gets ready to shine. And so I get it. He lost money with the injury. I get it. He may not make as much as you would hope, but this dude was on track to be a Super Bowl MVP. So go back to the team that got you there.
We'll be very, very...
When you know it's time, it's time. No better time to pass the torch than now. Mostly I gotta thank the coaches, man. I really didn't do shit.
And Bruce will always be the coolest.
Then you say win or lose, we booze. We definitely did that.
Holy hell, I've been to a lot of parties, I promise you. Ain't nothing compared to this one.
What are you gonna miss the most?
Players, cussing them out and hug them later. I can't say thank you enough and believe in the bullshit I threw out there. I have a job now, and I kind of love the title's pretty good. We'll figure out what the hell it means soon. But this was my Christmas present from the coaches. If you notice, the label said no risk it, no biscuit.
All right, the no risk it, no biscuit man heads to the front office and makes way for new head coach Todd Bowles down in Tampa Bay. Jeremy, how did the Bucs come to the decision to go with Todd Bowles over Byron Leftwich as their new head coach?
Well, Bruce Arians had more equity with Todd Bowles.
Okay.
Bowles has been his right-hand man for the better part of the last decade. And make no mistake, the Bucs had a lot of say in what happened here. And I know internally they ranked Bowles as one of the strongest candidates in the head coaching pool back in January. He was a finalist for the Raiders job that Josh McDaniels got. So he just had a little stronger of a profile than Byron Leftwich, who probably needs another year to develop. And luckily for him now, Bowles can be the overseer and Leftwich can hunker down with Tom Brady. They can construct the entire offense pretty much as they see fit. Bowles' influence on the run game and defense could come into play a little bit, but Leftwich is going to have a lot of ownership right now, and that will help him in 2023 to potentially get a head coaching job.
So we know Bruce Arians, obviously an offensive mind, Ninko. Do you think that because he's no longer there, this offense will look much different next year?
Hey, Tom's got the keys now. So that's the magic here with Tom. You have Tom and the ability of his just mind and offense and what he's been able to do throughout his whole career, and especially with Leftwich. So those two guys together, you know, they're going to come up with some plans. They're going to come up with scheme, and they're going to bounce ideas off each other. And now that you look at the staff, it's basically built with all ex-players. You know, all the coaches have played in the past. And I think that when you have that, you can really just open up the playbook and, okay, how do you like this? Or what do you see? How do you see that? And I see it this way. So I think that this offense is going to have some balance to it, maybe a little bit less risk it, no biscuit, maybe a little bit more precise passing. But I still think that having all those coaches on staff is going to help them that have that playing experience.
And my last year playing was actually in Tampa Bay with the Buccaneers. So with Bruce Arians, with Todd Bowles, with Byron Leftwich, and even that year, which was 2019 into the 2020 season, Bruce Arians was taking somewhat of a step back. He was letting Byron Leftwich run most of the offense. Then you add in Tom Brady to that, they pretty much are running it themselves. And so I think that it'll be smooth sailing, won't be that big of a transition offensively or defensively as well. So I like where Tampa Bay is at, and I love what Bruce Arians did in leaving this team in a good position, in good shape, as opposed to a team without a quarterback and then questioning where they're going to go in the future.
Yeah, from Blaine Gabbert a month ago to Tom Brady, now Todd Bowles as the head coach. And let's take a step back and examine this conference for a second, because it feels like on paper there are three teams that really stand out. The Bucs, Rams, the Packers. But Sam, I'll go right back to you. When you look at what the Rams have done and then what the Bucs have done, who do you think's in a better spot right now to win the NFC next year?
I think it's the Rams because of all the pieces that they've added and the ones they probably still will add. Bobby Wagner, 6-time first-team All-Pro. Add that to Aaron Donald, a 7-time first-team All-Pro. Matthew Stafford, Allen Robinson, who they just added, Cooper Kupp. So I love where the Rams are at. Now you go to Tampa Bay, which I think is a close number 2. We're excited about what they have, but Tampa Bay is still missing a couple pieces. Look at Allen Robinson. He's going to be great. I played with him in Chicago my last year in Chicago. He's outstanding, had over 1,000 receiving yards. And so I like the LA Rams. Tampa Bay, obviously they still need to help at outside linebacker. Jason Pierre-Paul may sign back, maybe he won't. Ndamukong Suh may sign back, maybe he won't. If they get those pieces set, I think their chances will be even better. But right now, I like the Rams.
All right, so Nico, how about you? If there's a team who's not the Rams and not the Bucs, and perhaps not even the Packers, who might be an NFC favorite, a wild card? If you, maybe a dark horse, because a wild card infers they don't win their division.
I think a lot of people are sleeping on the 49ers.
Ooh, okay.
And the
Trey Lance or Jimmy G?
I think Jimmy G is going to be the quarterback there. Okay. And listen, if you are in charge of the 49ers, your team is built very well. They went deep in the playoffs with Jimmy G, and I think Jimmy G, you know, is held to a high standard because he was underneath Tom Brady, and now he has always been on that over-focus because of that. So you look at what he's done. His winning percentage is off the charts. So if you have him there, a veteran quarterback, you still have the young quarterback who will be there in the future, but guess what? They weren't just going to give him away for nothing. So they wanted to, if they were going to trade him, they were going to make sure that they loaded up. Nobody was willing to give him the pieces, so they say, okay, he's going to be on the roster. He's going to be on the team. I think he's going to be the starter, and it's going to help the 49ers win more football games this year.
All right, 2 things. One is I'm told the 49ers are comfortable keeping Garoppolo's $26 million salary on the books, at least for now. They feel like they can do all their draft free agency business with that in play. But I was also told that Trey Lance, as he's been training out in California with John Beck, notable QB coach, that they've gotten indications that, hey, you're going to be the guy. Informal indications, like 2022 is your year. Now, maybe that's just the 49ers' way of just getting him ready and getting him in the mindset of being a starter, but something's going to have to give here between those two.
And I like, Nico, where you're going with the San Francisco 49ers as long as Trey Lance is at quarterback. I think the upside, the potential is huge. I love Jimmy G. He is a winner, but I think the potential of having someone who can move around like Trey Lance, now he's getting better, has a year under his belt. All the indications we heard from Jeremy, I think that San Francisco will be a force to be reckoned with, especially with this X factor at QB.
Football, we cannot wait. The NFL regular season. We have the draft to get around to. Hey, time for one more thing. And you may not have known this, but our guy, Marcus Swagoo Spears, was actually recruited heavily by Duke basketball to go play.
Wow.
So why didn't he play? And, of course, Cowboys All-Pro linebacker Micah Parsons quote tweeted Marcus's pictures and says, "You folded. I would have given up to play at Duke." Now, I mean, what an athlete. For those who don't know, Marcus Spears is also considered by many one of Nick Saban's favorite players he's ever coached. And he's coached like half the Hall of Fame. He could have been one of Coach K's guys as well. Marcus, don't get it twisted, though. I could still cross you up and maybe dunk on you, unlike an 8-foot hoop. NFL Live is back on Monday.